We're off to the start of another week on this Monday. Cheers, cup of coffee to you, brought to you by Keystone Financial. This is a mug thanks to my brother and his business. I hope that you're ready to get off to a great start this weekend, and I hope here as I get us going this week, I don't sound discouraged, a little tired and fatigued this morning, but also a little heavy-hearted as I think about this week. I don't know your perspective, but I feel like in Ohio right now, as we're about to start rolling into what's happening next, I feel like various sides or various groups are kind of going and grabbing their kindling and their logs and their starter fluid, and they're getting ready to start a fire based on what comes out this week. And I just fear that as the governor and Ohio starts to make decisions about what's next, that you're really going to start to see some gross divides, some really aggressive reactions, and some hostility to each other. Now, I'm not saying that people don't have a right to opinions. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to your opinion. I'm not even saying you don't have the right to be passionate about your opinion. I think you do. But I think the way we interact with this is just so critical, and I think there's so much that we all have to understand as we process this that I think is so important for us to be effective as just people together. There's so much that we all have to acknowledge about never having done this before, and so I want to give a couple thoughts because I really believe this could be one of the most significant things over the next few months for many of us in our families, in our workplaces, with our friend circles. For those of us that are in churches like me, even in our churches, the distinction of opinions and thoughts about what should happen in states in the country and about how to navigate life going forward with COVID. And so I don't mean this to be political. I just want to give you some things to reflect on that I'm trying to reflect on myself. Okay. So the first thing that I want you to think about as you think about whatever happens next with the state and the decisions is I want you to consider your bias. Number one, I want you to consider your bias. Everyone has a lens to which they look at this through. And again, it's no judgment on your lens. If you're an essential worker, particularly on the front lines of this in healthcare or a service industry, you have a lens, and it's a appropriate lens for you to have, but you have a lens. If you're someone that's lost a job, you have a lens. If you're on a certain side of the political aisle, you have a lens. If you have a certain approach towards facts and science and data, you have a lens. And actually, even depending on the way you think about science and data, your lens might shift or your bias might shift. So we all have a bias, and what I want us all to do is to be honest about our bias, because that bias is gonna shape the way we interact with each other. And so I just want you to do the work to say, what's my bias? How do I think about this? What drives what I am saying about what I'm about to do? Is it, if I'm honest, I'm like an overly sensitive, clean person. Is if I'm honest, I'm like overly sensitive to conspiracies. If I'm honest, I'm overly sensitive to anything that reeks of taking my liberty. If I'm honest, I'm overly sensitive to anything that messes with my wallet. So just what is your bias, okay? And really look at that and be honest about your bias. The second thing is do the work. The data on all of this is changing really, really fast. Where we were 5 weeks ago and what we heard is different than what we know and what we see now. And I'm not trying to push you one way or the other to that. I'm just trying to say that the line of scrimmage for facts is different today than it was 5 weeks ago. And if your opinions are based on 5 weeks ago, then I'm just saying do the work. So, whatever your understanding of the virus is, as it relates to the lethality of the disease, to infection, to testing, to the idea of tracing, to what it means to have a comorbidity or any of these things, whatever your understanding was, do the work. Whatever your understanding about what this has done to the economy, do the work. Whatever your understanding about what the secondary effects of COVID have been to everything like suicide or domestic abuse or alcohol sales or anything, do the work. Just do the work. Don't take somebody else's word. Go do the work and really find out what's going on. And don't just sit in what you thought 5 weeks ago. Make sure you've done the work. So know your bias. Number two, do the work. Number three, be respectful. Man, there's people I know and I love in my life who are already seeing this differently than I see it. And I'm trying to really think, how do I love them and am gracious to them? So, a couple things I'm really trying to think about as I try to be respectful to them: ask questions. Why do they feel the way that they feel? What's going on? Where did they get their data? What's driving this? Hey, do you know your bias? What is your bias? I'm really trying to ask questions to understand. I'm also really trying to understand their perspective. I've already learned from a few people, for example, that their perspective is shaped by at risk family members that they have either living with or that they're deeply connected to, and people who have stories that have affected them of people that they know. And so ultimately, just let's make sure that we're respectful, that we talk with love and kindness and graciousness. Let's recognize we're all not going to get our way. Whatever our way is, the decision we want isn't going to be 100% that. And so we're going to have to learn to be respectful in this process. So know your bias, do the work, be respectful. And then the fourth thing is be open to change. Let's none of us be so stubborn that just because this is what we've thought or felt, or because of our bias, that we won't change, that we won't listen, that we won't consider, that we won't get out of just maybe our fears dug in or our optimism too highly entrenched. But let's all do the work and consider all these things, and then be open to change. Maybe to say that we thought something that was true really wasn't true. Maybe to think that because of our bias, we actually have landed in a camp that doesn't make sense anymore, or we need to switch camps. So let's be open to change. I'm really trying to be prayerful about what's going on with the people in my life, and specifically my own church, as I consider how this is going to go. I'm even thinking about, on a very personal level, my own staff that works for me. I can see across all of even the employees I have that there's just differences of opinion and differences of where we should go. And so I'm trying to process all this myself. So know your bias, do the work, be respectful, and be open to change. Apologize for going a little long today. I hope you have an incredible Monday and a great week. We're going to get through this. Let's hang in there. We'll talk to you soon.